Representative Paul Ryan has indicated that he will indeed fill the soon-to-be vacant speakership position, which, by the way, he got a lot of backing. Finally got the backing from the Freedom Caucus, by the way. Now, before the Freedom Caucus backed him, and before he decided to go into the speakership, he had a number of conditions he presented. One of those being that all conservatives must back him for the speakership. Now, that, of course, has been fulfilled. Now, I thought it was going to be a little bit more difficult because one of the reasons that I think John Boehner had actually left the position is the infighting from the different caucuses. Now, that's not to say that if Paul Ryan actually accepts the speakership, that it's going to be an easier job. No, it's still going to be a super hard job. They can say we support you now and then stick the dagger in the back later. It's kind of how politics works. We're with you now until you make a decision that I don't like. And then we are not with you. So there's that. I imagine it'd be quite difficult. And of course, John Boehner left because he'd had enough of it. It's a nearly impossible job to hold these different factions at bay. No wonder John Boehner drank so much. Anyway, I wonder if Paul Ryan is actually going to start a drinking habit if he becomes speaker. Now, what's funny is that he made some of these demands, right? Because he essentially had the old Republican coalitions or factions within the House by the balls. They need a speaker. They need somebody. Or else, especially to make a decision on whether or not to raise the debt ceiling. Because if they don't, well, they're going to shut down the government, and who's going to get blamed? The Republicans. Now, some Republicans want to shut down the government, and this is one of the factions, the Freedom Caucus, that Paul Ryan has actually tried to have to wrangle. So it's a very involved situation, right? There's a lot of factors to this. Now, one of his positions, or I should say one of his conditions, is that he wanted to preserve his family time. Now, he asked for this. He said, quote, "I cannot and will not give up my family time." Okay. Hey, look, I get it. I'm pro-family, right? I get the need for a work-life balance, even though I have no life because I spend all my time doing political stuff, watching political shows, reading articles, and doing my own political show. I don't have time for a work-life balance, but I understand the need for it. I do. Now, according to Think Progress, Ryan has 3 young children who live in his hometown of Janesville, Wisconsin, with his wife, Jana Ryan, and he travels back every weekend to spend time with them. Oh, look at that. You get to go back to Wisconsin from Washington every weekend and spend time with your family. That's great. I'm in favor of that. Now, it continues. By continuing this tradition, he may have to forego some speaker duties, like traveling the country to raise money for the party. Oh, so sad. Oh, sorry, guys. I just don't want to go and raise money for the Republican Party. He probably already spends 4 hours a day, which is the average that every politician has to sit there and beg for money for. So I get not wanting to take your weekend and actually do that. I'd be sick of it too. Let's be honest. Now, there's nothing wrong with family time. I like family time. This seems like a pretty reasonable request. It does. It's reasonable for Ryan. However, I do wish that Paul Ryan was just as reasonable to poorer families, to other people's families, as they expect us to be for his. Now, let me explain, and I go to Think Progress for this. Paul Ryan has put forth a number of budgets and policy proposals that call for deep spending cuts in social programs. Now, some of those programs, or some of those cuts, take aim at important programs for parents. Childcare subsidies. The sky-high cost of childcare in the U.S. can dwarf a parent's income, particularly a low-income parent. Child care subsidies help defray that cost, allowing a parent to find a place to leave their kids while going to work, and knowing that they don't have to rely on family members or unsafe, unstable arrangements. Without them, however, poor parents can face a tough choice between continuing to work and simply staying home because the cost of childcare is too high. Now, those are some very, very important points. Childcare is super expensive, and it does act as a barrier for people to go to work. Well, if it costs more than you're actually going to get at your job to put your kid in childcare, what's the point of having the job? Really. If you're there to try to help your family, what's the point of having the job if you're spending all your money on just childcare just to go to work? You're not getting anywhere. You're not getting ahead. If anything, you might even be behind. Not a good system, not a good situation we have here. Now, Ryan has often said that it's not these problems. These problems, they're not actual problems. No, the real problem with poor people is that they have a culture of dependency. They have a culture problem. They're poor because they want to be poor. Yes, that's it. Of course, that's it. Yeah, that's the simple explanation. Blaming poor people for being poor so that we can justify not doing anything to help them not be poor. Makes a lot of sense if you're a Republican, not so much if you live in the real world. He says that they don't value work. And he's often cited the welfare reform enacted in the 1990s by Bill Clinton, Democrat, as a model of success. But I think progress continues. By imposing incredibly strict work requirements in the name of forcing poor people to work, the changes ensured that people who rely on cash benefits, mostly poor single mothers, who now have to work 2 to 3 minimum wage jobs, add on school or training to get a better job with more pay, and they pretty much have ended or destroyed that work-life balance. That's essentially what's going on here. Now, Paul Ryan, he's pretty lucky. He's got leverage to demand time to go home and be with his children. But for the rest of the country, for the rest of America, we're not so lucky. We don't have that choice. There's no guaranteed paid time off for holidays, illness, vacation, or the arrival of a new child. Now, even the weekend that he uses to be with his family isn't actually protected by law. Without paid family leave, many mothers end up back at work just weeks after giving birth. We're the only country in the world, the only industrialized modern country in the world, I should say, that doesn't have paid maternity leave. That is mandated by law. Now, a lot of companies, a lot of forward-thinking companies, will offer that, but there's nothing that's mandated. So that person, that low-income person, they're not covered. They're not going to get that paid family leave. That's kind of a disaster. It means that they have to skip whatever time they have for bonding with that child, go immediately back to work. That's not exactly a good program. That's not something that I'm in favor of. As I said, I am literally more pro-family than Paul Ryan when it comes to his votes. It seems like he's more pro his family and no one else's. And of course, there's no paid sick leave. And without that, parents can't take time away from their jobs to care for their kids when and if they get sick. Now, of this, Paul Ryan, it seems like he's got a sort of a blind hypocrisy. Now, I don't think he realizes how hypocritical he is. And it's not because he, doesn't value his family, right? He values his family, and he does want time off to see them. And that's not why he's a hypocrite. He's a hypocrite because he doesn't seem to support anyone else who is poor doing the same thing. Now, some of you might say it's not the same. Well, I guess in a way, maybe, but in the other way that it is the same is they are both getting paid by taxpayer money. And Paul Ryan gets more time off in a year than any of us could ever dream. And he still gets paid $174,000 a year. And then he can make these demands. He's got leverage. He's got a lot of advantages that poor people don't have. And that's the hypocrisy of it. And he wants to take what little care that people have in single families and child care subsidies. He wants to take that away. He wants to cut that for your family. Now, I don't agree with that. That is not a pro-family position. And besides, a lot of these single mothers who rely on these programs, they work. Welfare has had work requirements and time limits put on them since Bill Clinton reformed it in the 1990s, or essentially cut it. Now, as for Paul Ryan, I can't really say that he's accomplished a whole lot of work in his time in Congress. In fact, the whole purpose of Paul Ryan and the whole purpose of the Republican Party as of right now is to do as little work as possible and to get as little done as possible. while, of course, scooping up more and more benefits from themselves. That's not pro family, and that's certainly not pro work.